Okay, welcome to the 2024 Standard Specification Training Seminar for the 400 series. As we go through this, you'll notice that deleted wording will be struck through and in red, and new wording will be green and underlined. As a brief overview, there were 62 items in the 2014 spec book. 2 of them are being retired. There are 2 new items in the 2024 spec book, and so there is still a total of 62 items in the 2024 spec book. Item 400, excavation and backfill for structures. Really no major changes here. A lot of the changes are mostly editorial in nature. I added a paragraph for optional shaping and bedding for precast concrete pipes. Changed some of the payment for when structural excavation is not a pay item. And item 401, pretty much just editorial changes here. 402, we added a little bit on to the description of the item. Otherwise, no changes. Item 403, the change here is that the materials and construction, all these references to retaining walls are basically just moved to that item 423. So temporary walls is going to be handled under item 423 now, rather than temporary special shoring. In item 404, one of the big changes here is that we added some language to include rigid templates when driving piles under certain situations. Foundation load testing, we added ASTM D8169. A few other minor changes. Timber piling, we added a minor change to how it's measured. Item 407. The big change here is in regards to the coating, essentially, and most of these changes were in order to get it more in line with item 446, which is field cleaning and painting steel. For soil nail anchors and rock nail anchors, which are the next 2 items, we clarified in this 2024 version that temporary walls are not required to provide epoxy-coated bars. Rock nail anchors, the same change there. We added some language about measurement for verification tests and for proof tests. Field shaft foundations, item 416. Basically what we added here is some language to say when a mass placement, when a pour would need to be considered a mass placement, and that's for shafts with a diameter exceeding 7 feet. And essentially what we're saying is that you don't have to do a separate mass pour for every single shaft of 7 feet diameter or greater. You just need to do one for each shaft of a different size, or when the mix design changes. Few other minor modifications. Item 420, we added an allowance to be able to use an adhesive anchor installer certified by ACI. We took out some previously confusing language here in the ordinary surface finish. The big change for item 420 is that we took basically payment for post-tensioning out of item 420, and it's now going to be paid for under item 426. Item 421, there are some pretty significant changes here. We added natural pozzolans in the materials section due to the fly ash shortage. We've changed the coarse aggregate gradation. It used to be the class of concrete, and now it's basically based on the dimensions of the member, clear cover, and spacing between reinforcing. We included specific language that allows 56-day test specimens to be made and tested and potentially used as the basis for acceptance. Item 422, this is one of the bigger changes to this item, basically clarifying a saturated surface dry condition and when that's met. This change is added to several different items, as you'll see going forward. The other big change for item 422 is that the default direction for saw cut grooving on the finished bridge deck surface will be parallel or longitudinal along the bridge, parallel to the structure centerline or longitudinal on the bridge. And so we took out any of the language that's no longer applicable there. (423), there's some language added about this DMS 4800, which allows the use of proprietary earth retaining wall systems. And we also, like we talked about earlier, we added language about temporary MSE walls. (424), not really any huge changes here. Ponding method did not actually used to describe a ponding method, and now it does. 425, really no huge changes here, primarily editorial here. Item 426, okay, this is post-tensioning like we talked about previously. We added a sentence to allow a higher protection level as shown on the plans. We added a new article for a stressing safety plan. Grout mock-ups, verification of wet density, and the measurement and payment, like we discussed earlier, these are no longer subsidiary to item 420. These are going to be paid for by each post-tensioned element, which could be a vent, a column, a cap, or something else defined on the plans. Item 427, this is surface finishes for concrete. Basically what we did here is we added language and some paragraphs that describe specifically type X epoxies or epoxy waterproofing. This used to always be a bid code under item 427, but we didn't have any language in the spec describing it. So now we do. 429, concrete structure repair. Added quite a few things to this one since this is becoming a very frequently used item. Added some language about mechanical and adhesive anchors. And the big change is that we added an entire equipment section to clarify what equipment the contractor would be expected to have on site when performing these repairs. We also added that SSD condition and some clarifying language about using a bonding agent. (431), again, language about SSD. 432, riprap. There are some gradation changes to stone riprap that are worth reading. I didn't cover them in too much detail here in this presentation. For bearings, there are some changes, but this mostly affects the fabrication of the bearing. None of these changes really affect field construction or installation of the bearings. It's all kind of manufacturing related. Again, more manufacturing related changes. Cleaning and sealing joints, item 438. Basically, this adds language for foam type joint sealants. These are pre-compressed foam joint seal systems, which didn't used to be a special provision, but it's now just rolled into the standard specification. For bridge deck overlays, the major change here is that we took polyester polymer concrete, PPC, which used to be a special specification, and rolled it into the standard spec. And all these equipment changes and other articles are basically adding the specific requirements for PPC into this item. For item 440, reinforcement for concrete. There's new language added about welded deformed bars, mechanical couplers, and GFRP. A lot of these used to be special provisions, but they've just been rolled into the standard specification now. Steel structures has had some fairly major changes. These are, again, a lot of these are manufacturing or fabrication related, not necessarily construction or installation related. So I didn't go into a ton of detail here, and I would encourage you to just read the specification for more information. For items 442 and 445, a lot of these changes are just getting things in alignment with current ASTM specifications. For item 446, field cleaning and painting steel, we took out system 1B, which was overcoating in a high corrosion environment. The decision or the reason there is that if you're in a high corrosion environment, a simple overcoat is not going to be effective. You need a much more substantial level of protection for that type of environment. A couple other minor changes. Some of the language was changed to read AMP instead of SSPC. Structural bolting, again, a lot of these changes are to bring things in line with current ASTM specifications. Same with anchor bolts, a lot of it is ASTM specification related. Item 450, railing. Similar to the bearing pads, a lot of the language added here is primarily related to manufacturing or fabrication. This DMS 7395 describes fabrication, metal railing fabrication plant qualification. Item 454, bridge expansion joints. This sentence here, provide backer rods that are circular and are 25% larger than the joint opening, was taken from the bridge standards that we have and added into the specifications. Additionally, we added a paragraph about foam type joint seals, like I discussed previously, and the type A joint, which used to be considered subsidiary to the slab. It's now going to be paid for as its own item. A type A joint, what we mean by that is just the backer rod and a class 7 sealing on top. Gabions and Gabion mattresses, there's a lot of minor changes about how to secure the filter fabric. A few minor changes for corrugated metal pipe. And a lot of the changes for the next few items are all related to this DMS 7305, which basically governs the fabrication of these precast drainage elements. Again, here, these are all changing this to DMS 7305 and associated changes. Same for item 465. Very minor changes in item 466 and 467, clarifying that the repair should be made in accordance with our concrete repair manual. This is another just clarifying sentence. More clarifying language in item 474. Bridge deck surfacing. Essentially what we've done in bridge deck surfacing is that we've changed any milling that's going to be performed on a bridge deck is going to be a micro mill. So we added language here. We also added some additional language governing hydro demolition on a bridge deck, essentially saying that any equipment that's on the bridge deck for a hydro demolition needs to be evaluated in accordance with item 7 Because these units get really heavy and we're taking section off of our deck. So that the deck we're requiring an analysis to be made of the deck, considering the equipment weight as well as deterioration to the deck or removal of material from the deck. Item 492 for timber preservation and treatment. Basically, the major change is that table 1 is completely just reorganized. Item 495, raising existing structures. What we wanted to do with this item was to clarify and isolate payment for raising the structure from payment for associated work. So the associated work could be, we may need to raise the structure in order to perform repairs under a beam. We may need to raise the structure in order to replace a bearing. And the idea is that we want to make sure that the contractor is getting paid, one, to raise the structure, and then separately for any other work that they have to do in addition to that. That concludes the 400 series items.